Welcome to ESVN, the Emma Sports Vigeland Network show. My name is Emma Vigeland, and it is nearly football season, folks. We have less than 2 weeks until kickoff. A week and a half. It has been way too long. Say hello to Bradley Alsop, who is back on the Jets of it all.
Yeah, baby. Forget everything from the last 11 months.
Well, okay, so I'm actually a little more excited about the Jets now that I've done my fantasy research than I was previously. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But, folks, you know what to do. Maybe I already said this, but please rate us 5 stars, like the stream, subscribe, youtube.com/ESVN show. I'm excited about the Jets a little bit. I just wonder if Rodgers can hold up for the season because, damn, that division is weak. I mean, the Patriots just traded Judon, right? Like, who else is in that division? And I think that the Dolphins are like a much worse team this year than they were the previous year.
Well, I guess it's also depends on your opinion on the structure of the Bills.
Yes,
Like if we think
but
the
you know
offensive,
how I feel about that. It's a
yeah,
one-man show up there.
I think it's like, do you trust that to hold up? Do we trust it despite losing? Well, here's the other thing too that we did not get to, which is actually probably even more existential than anything else, even beyond what we've been discussing with the Bills too, is Matt Milano is out for the season already.
Yes.
And so a defense that was already experiencing a significant degree of change with Micah Hyde no longer in the fold, Jordan Poyer no longer in the fold, kind of the Tremaine Edmonds no longer in the fold. All of kind of the luminary, Tre'Davious White, all of the number of the luminaries of this Bills defense over the last like 4 to 6 years gone due to free agency or other acquisitions, and then Matt Milano again, who is kind of the real North Star of this defense, especially with all those people gone, not being there. Like, that's a big concern. That's a steep drop off from Matt Milano to Terrell Dotson or whoever is in that going to take that over that spot in the linebacking core. That is a big shift that they're going to have to deal with, which they were not dealing with, when we were discussing this even last week or 3 or 4 days after that.
Yeah. We'll get into that in a sec. I think it'll probably come up within the context of our fantasy discussion, but I just will say next Monday is Labor Day, so we will not be on with you, but we will make sure to have an NFL show right before the season starts. We will give our predictions. We'll be back on Thursdays, so perhaps we'll just do next Thursday where we give our Super Bowl predictions. We'll look at the odds for things like MVP and offensive and defensive rookie of the year. We'll give our division winners. We'll lay out our playoff bracket. I mean, this will be when we start to get really serious about having some fun out there on the trail, as Vivek Ramaswamy would say.
I'm so desperate for football content that I was very tuned into week 0 of the college football season, including the Georgia Tech beating number 10 Florida State in Dublin on a last-second field goal. And I'm also watching preseason offensive line highlights.
I have been watching a little bit of the preseason. We'll talk about what we saw from Drake May last night, which was actually really encouraging. But let's just do fantasy right off the bat here. Let's do it. We're just going to go through the big board, and I'm going to give you guys my takes. I mean, hey, people that are watching this is just giving a gift to the people that I play fantasy football with, but I care more about the audience and being an honest analyst than I do my own fantasy football prospects. I'm going to be real about who I really think is the best choice basically in each round, what the basic rules are, and what my rules of thumb are and what tiebreakers are. I mean, it's pretty reasonable. I don't like to overthink some of these things, but it's usually just a gut feel about how I feel about some of these teams. And the place that, and obviously backed up by statistics, but like I'm going to say right now, my number 1 overall player is not Christian McCaffrey, which is not the consensus of the rankings. But let's pull this up here, if you don't mind, Bradley. If we could just zoom in. So Christian McCaffrey is going first overall. By the way, we're going to do all these rankings in PPR, which is point per reception format. And we're using Fantasy Pros here as a guide. Like ESPN and Yahoo have wildly different kind of rankings. So this is probably the best way for us to aggregate the two apps that you're probably playing fantasy football on. Although if you're on ESPN, I got to be honest with you, time to move over to Yahoo here. So Fantasy Pros has 8 players in the top tier, which I actually really don't have any disagreement with, because I think that the 8th player they have wouldn't be my 8th player. Justin Jefferson, I think they're underestimating him. I mean, he's still the best receiver in the NFL, and Sam Darnold is not that much of a drop off in that offense that throws like on 70% of the snaps or something to that effect. I mean, the volume is insane, so I would not put Justin Jefferson down there. But I think the drop off with that group of 8 guys, McCaffrey, CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill, Jamar Chase, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Breece Hall, Bijan, Justin Jefferson, that is like the top tier. And then the drop off to AJ Brown, I think is going to be significant. Now, Garrett Wilson could be really good, but Christian McCaffrey as the first overall pick here, it gives me a little bit of concern. Bradley's getting me water. Thank you very much. It gives me a little bit of concern because, first of all, Trent Williams is not back at practice at this point. He's holding out for a contract, as is Brandon Ayuk, who's their second wide receiver on a team where the top wide receiver is often injured in Deebo Samuel. So McCaffrey's another year older. He's been apparently dealing with a calf strain throughout the preseason. So he hasn't been he hasn't really been practicing, and like you don't, he's their top offensive player, so you don't need to read too much into that, but he is another year older. And I just like the situation with Breece Hall and Bijan Robinson. I'm going to be honest, if you're going to take a running back in the first round or in the first few picks, like, I like their situation more. Breece Hall was phenomenal last year when he finally got playing time coming off that ACL back in record time. He has elite speed. He has home run hit ability. He is also going to be used in that offense, I think, in a pass-catching role in a way that I'm not necessarily sure that people have fully kind of calculated into their rankings here. I mean, it's like McCaffrey is the known quantity, but Breece Hall is younger. He has played more than Bijan Robinson, so I'd put him a tick above Bijan in that category. And he's more proven. And I also just think Rodgers' playing style at this point in his career, when he's in his 40s, he made Aaron Jones into a fantasy juggernaut with all the dump offs that he was doing in that same Nathaniel Hackett offense that the Jets now have. And in terms of talent, Breece Hall is more talented than Aaron Jones has ever been. So I like the fit. I like the volume. And I like the way that the quarterback is playing in especially a points per reception format, where I could see Breece Hall getting a lot of dump offs if the pocket is closing in on Aaron Rodgers. I still like Bijan Robinson. I do. There's a lot of smoke, though, coming out about Tyler Algier continuing to have some touches in that offense. But the Falcons, in terms of a situation, they also have an older quarterback who I think will be dumping it off. They also don't really have a wide receiver in that offense that stretches the field to the same degree. I mean, Drake London is much more of a possession guy. So a lot remain. There's way more moving parts in the Atlanta situation because it's a new quarterback altogether. But honestly, if I'm being real, I think I like both Breece and Bijan with fresh legs in the systems that they're in more than Christian McCaffrey, who has been injury prone at this point in his career. Of course, running backs tend to be, right. It's the most injury prone position in fantasy football. Now, as it relates to wide receivers in the first round, man, it's tough. CeeDee Lamb just got his contract, right? So he's going to be incredibly high volume, but Tyreek Hill's a year older. That Miami team just got worse, and he's going to be a top fantasy player. You can't really go wrong with any of these guys, but if I were to re-rank it, I would probably put... I think Justin Jefferson is the best receiver in this class. It's just from a fantasy perspective. He gets a lot of targets because they throw the ball more than anybody. And the Vikings play indoors. They're going to be playing indoors a good amount this year, as will Detroit, by the way, which is important for Amon-Ra St. Brown. But I have to put Amon-Ra as wide receiver 4. Actually, no, I'm putting him at wide receiver 5. Just because even though he gets a lot of targets, he plays over the middle. I worry about his longevity, even though he's quite durable, as we saw in the receiver series. He plays through injury, but there's just more options on that Detroit offense. Like, Amon-Ra, can he replicate it at his amazing season like he had last year? Sure. But you also have Sam Laporta emerging. You have Jameson Williams going into another year as a professional with no distractions in the offseason. And you have the emergence of Jahmyr Gibbs as somebody who can catch short passes, not just Amon-Ra in the slot. And I think that a lot of teams are going to hone in on him. So I still like Justin Jefferson the most. Then probably CeeDee Lamb, then Tyreek Hill, then Jamar Chase, just because of the strength of schedule for Cincinnati, although I would not be shocked if he's wide receiver 1 at the end of this year. He still hasn't got his contract. And then I'd put Amon-Ra up there. But I just think, like, those top 3 running backs, there's a significant drop off to the next guy. Because if we could go to tier 2, according to Fantasy Pros, like Jonathan Taylor, I really do think is going to be good. He's maybe the only other running back of that group that I would take in the first round, because I think he does have good value. He'll have fresher legs after this year. Lighter boxes with Anthony Richardson. I wouldn't bet on a lot of the pass catchers, I should say, in that offense with Anthony Richardson as of right now. It's just like, haven't seen enough. And the volume of throwing is probably going to be less given the fact that he's such a phenomenal athlete with his legs. So I like Jonathan Taylor to have bigger plays and, again, another year away from that injury. At ADP, look at these guys. These are the guys that I don't feel strongly about in this way. I mean, Puka Nacua going 13 overall is insane when apparently Cooper Kupp has been tearing it up in camp. The previous years, he'd been a top 3 fantasy receiver for a few years in a row, and he just was marred by injuries last year, but he clearly has a connection with Stafford and is probably wide receiver 1 in that offense if healthy. So Nacua is an extremely high value wide receiver 2, but to have him going, I don't know, at the top of the second round as the second receiving option, potentially. I mean, look, he could be wide receiver 1, but then Cooper Kupp could be a very high-end wide receiver 2. I just think that Puka Nacua is going way too high with Cooper Kupp coming back into the fold. Marvin Harrison Jr. as 14th overall as wide receiver 9, that is way too much of a difference between the other 2 rookie receivers who have also been turning heads in camp, in Malik Neighbors and in Brian Thomas Jr., who I think is really good value in the later rounds. I mean, I understand Harrison's going to catch a lot of passes, and he already looks like a pro out there when he's lining up, but that seems too high for me. Same with Saquon. I have concerns about him losing a step. I also think that in similar situation in Philly as it is in Detroit, where they could be spreading the ball around a lot. There's just like, and when you have a running quarterback like Jalen Hurts, Saquon Barkley may not be getting the same volume, right? Like for a guy like Jonathan Taylor, he needed less volume. He needed less on his shoulders. Saquon, I just don't know. And they still have Kenneth Gainwell in that offense, and he likes to catch passes. They can rely on him to be sure-handed, especially on third down. So Saquon Barkley, I don't know if I would categorize him. I mean, RB6 probably makes sense, but in terms of situation, I kind of like ETN more than him. If we could scroll down a bit here. As at RB7, I like him a little bit more. That's probably it. I mean, I know Kyron Williams. Kyron Williams is a very exciting running back, I think, in this draft, because people underestimate how much, or how little, honestly. What's the right way to say it? People underestimate how much Sean McVay loves the run. Like that whole Super Bowl run with Todd Gurley, they set up everything by running the ball first. And Kyron Williams has shown that he can really make guys miss and operate in that zone scheme in a way that I think is really going to help out that offense. So I like Kyron Williams and ETN more as in this draft than Saquon Barkley.
And I think it goes to. I think the other interesting thing to take is to also juxtapose the offensive line situations in these for these three guys, in the sense that, one, the reason why I'm with you very much so on Kyron is that the Rams seemingly have a steal. Had a steal with their second round pick, guard Steve Avila last year, as well as, re-signing Kevin Dotson, who was really fantastic for them in the interior of their offensive line. And that's very much keyed into the fact that offensive line composition, especially in the interior, that's firmly for being able to make big lanes for Kyron Williams.
Yeah, right.
And then ideally, optimistically for the Jaguars, is Anton Harrison, who I've seen a little bit, in these preseason games. His pass protection, even I think as coming out as a rookie, was a little bit, always left something to be desired. But he seemingly on pin pull types of plays, and when he is pulling, he could be really impactful for them, making space and climbing to the second level for ETN in that Jacksonville offense, which I think they will need a kind of change up to what, obviously many teams anticipating Trevor Lawrence's passing offense. And then I think the question just remains, can the Eagles run game be A, more multiple than it was last season, and B, can it continue to be effective with the absence
Kelce,
of Jason Kelce and the introduction of Cam Jurgens?
Integral. People, a lot. It'll be interesting to see. We'll talk about quarterback in this. You see, quarterback 2 is Jalen Hurts. At 22nd overall in these rankings, that's not where I would take this guy. The only rule of thumb for me, I don't take a quarterback until at least the earliest, the third round, and I think I've maybe done that once. There's one guy that I would consider in that situation, and that is the most reliable fantasy quarterback in the NFL, and you see him right there up on the screen at QB1, Josh Allen. Josh Allen is a tank. Josh Allen runs the ball a ton. He throws. He's the entirety of the offense in a way that, like, Mahomes is just they're more balanced because they're more talented. Like Isaiah Pacheco, I really like. Because of that differential. Mahomes is still going to be a really good fantasy quarterback, and I like him as QB2 as opposed to Jalen Hurts. But Hurts, it remains to be seen if he can replicate. And at the end of last year was really bad with all the drama with him and Nick Sirianni, and then losing Kelce, who was the one who was really giving him the signals for protections at the line. QB2 is a little rich for me at 22nd overall. The earliest I would take a quarterback would be Josh Allen at the top of the third round. If you are in a league where, I'm going by 12-team leagues here, by the way. If you're in a league where, you feel like maybe quarterbacks are more popular, I could see him at the end of the second, but you can get much more bang for your buck later on in the draft in that regard. I love Drake London and Chris Olave. I am lower on. Like Drake London, the problem with him is that he's a talented player, but for fantasy purposes, he's not a yak guy. He's a jump ball player. So he's very touchdown dependent in this offense. He's not going to be somebody who is running over the middle on a slant and, taking it to the house. That's just not his game. That's Olave's game. But I just think that I think that there's a chance that the Saints are one of the worst teams in the NFL this year. And I don't trust that situation, nor would I trust a guy at his size and weight to be my wide receiver 1, to be honest with you. So at their value, I like Jalen Waddle. I like Mike Evans, who still has yet to not have an 1,000-yard season in the NFL, even at his age. He's one of the most consistent players in the NFL. I really like that group of Jalen Waddle, Cooper Kupp, Nico Collins there. I think they're really strong values. Cooper Kupp and Nico Collins and Mike Evans are all wide receiver 1s going behind some wide receiver 2s, including Jalen Waddle, right? So you can look at that and say, okay, in the third round, those are all guys that can provide value for me. And I really like Kyron Williams as well. Ayuk situation with the contract, we really have to wait and see, especially now that CeeDee Lamb has driven up the price. Sam Laporta, let's just scroll down a bit. He's there at 27th overall. Again, I still have a very similar feelings about just the number of options that they have on offense in Detroit. I mean, him being number 27 overall and Travis Kelce at 31 overall, and then you see there's not another tight end in sight. I don't know if I like Trey McBride maybe as a situation more than Sam Laporta, right? It's Marvin Harrison, it's James Conner, and it's Trey McBride. And Trey McBride was the best fantasy tight end in the league last year after Kyler Murray came back. They clearly have an enormous connection, and I would rather have him later than have Laporta and wait and have him in the third round and not be able to get, say, a wide receiver one in that way.
And I think to your point, Emma, I think we sort of discussed a little bit last year and kind of in a bit of our postseason coverage of these things, just in sort of our post-mortem discussions of the season, being that the Cardinals offense, I think, was actually kind of surprisingly impressive and interesting to watch despite the lack of talent on the roster. Right. And seemingly, as you were saying, and I think the stats, I think both in terms of fantasy statistics but also output and productivity statistics show that Kyler Murray and Trey McBride have seemingly had a very, very strong kind of almost seamless connection. It sort of seems like McBride is a little bit of his safety blanket when he kind of needs a bit of a, kind of an escape when things are maybe breaking down a little bit. So I think with another year under these guys' belt in Arizona, as well as as a little bit of a rehabilitated offensive line, also impressive rookie Paris Johnson that they drafted high last year, another year under his belt, Isaiah Adams coming in at guard in the draft. I think that, and I think if I'm not mistaken, Jonah Williams, I think was signed by Arizona away from Detroit. So yep. I think this offensive line, I think, holding a little bit up more for Kyler, and Kyler having a few less options on offense, as you're saying, than Jared Goff does in Detroit, might make it so that McBride just might get a higher share of targets than Laporta might, given, having, as we've been saying, David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs, Jameson Williams, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Is DJ Chark in Detroit now?
DJ Chark is actually in LA.
Oh, he left. So no DJ Chark. But I think so overall. I think overall I do think that he could be a high volume tight end when, as you've been saying too, the cupboard of tight end picks in fantasy high up in these higher rounds is not super substantive. There's not a whole lot of options outside of the first, I think, 3 to 4 or 5 guys being generous.
Yeah. Pacheco is a really good option. He runs hard and is beloved by the coaching staff, and I think will be on the field quite a bit. I like him at that ADP. Devon Achane, you've got to worry a little bit about the dang injuries. He's RB10, seen there at 35th overall by Fantasy Pros. I've seen some advanced stats that I can't recall off the top of my head that think that his ADP is too high. Now, I'm just flagging those concerns because I don't really have them exactly right in front of me, but it's going to be hard, I think, for the Dolphins to replicate what they did last year. That's overall how I feel from a run game perspective. Now, Achane and his ability to be a home run hitter made things really easy on Tua in that offense last year, where they were able to do a lot of misdirection and then eventually bring players closer to the line of scrimmage, and then what do you know, bomb to Tyreek Hill, or he can take it to the house after getting a 15-yard pass from Tua or whatever. So Achane, he can go either way. He's really boomer bust, as is his playing style. Other players I like in this range, Derrick Henry is going to be the running back for the Lamar Jackson offense, and he's going at 40 overall. I think he's really safe. DJ Moore will be the number one receiver on a Caleb Williams-led offense. Now it's like, okay, I have to see it with Chicago, right? But do I really have to see it? I mean, I saw enough in the preseason. I can see that Caleb Williams can sling it, and DJ Moore can run fast. And that contract extension or, added benefit that he got in the offseason just speaks to how the team thinks about him. So, again, look for wide receiver ones, look for situations where they're going to get a lot of volume, right? And I think DJ Moore is a great option in that area. I like Devontae Smith too, but as I've said, the drama surrounding the Eagles offense is concerning to me from a fantasy perspective. It's just too much unknown, and we saw what happened in the back half of the year when things just completely fell apart. Now, can Kellen Moore stabilize that situation? He was brought in to stabilize the Chargers, and that didn't go that well. So I don't really know what to make of him. And I always thought he was a bit overrated in Dallas anyway as a play caller. So, look, Malik Neighbors, guys know how I feel about him. I think he, volume-wise, if you're okay with okay, I'm gonna have to bite the bullet on a Daniel Jones quarterback situation and some of the risk that's involved there, he's going to be wide receiver 1 for that team. So the difference that we're seeing in Marvin Harrison Jr. going 15, 16, 20 spots ahead of Malik Neighbors, I don't understand that, right? I think that they're going to be very similar in terms of stat lines. These are both top 6 picks that the team is going to want to feature. Although I still think the best value is Brian Thomas Jr., also going to be I think probably the go-to guy for that offense, and that's what camp reports say down in Jacksonville. But let's scroll down. Yeah, guys, I'm not high on is I'm sorry to tell you this, Stephon Diggs at that ADP. Bradley has Stephon Diggs. Diggs is wide receiver 24 is reasonable, but I would rather have Zay Flowers, who's going behind him there, as you can see at 48 overall. T. Higgins, I would rather have. Rashee Rice. Rashee Rice is probably not going to get suspended this year based on reports. He is the number 1 receiver in Kansas City, especially with Hollywood Brown out. So I would rather have him than Stephon Diggs in an offense that there's going to be one wide receiver 1, and I think that's Nico Collins. He's got the size, he's got the speed, he can do it all. And then you have a bunch of smaller players that are going to play different roles on that offense. I think Tank Dell has more in the tank, no pun intended, than Diggs. And Diggs will get some gritty, smart guy stuff, right? But do I think he's going to be a world beater in this offense? I just don't think that's the case.
There are a lot of mouths to feed, as you're saying, in the sense of there's even both in terms of run game snaps and screen passes to Joe Mixon, but then also to your point, Nico Collins, Tank Dell, Diggs, Dalton Schultz, Noah Brown if they need him in sub-package stuff. There are a number of John Mechie. If he's there seemingly are some trade rumors swirling around Mechie because maybe there is an odd man out situation. But as you're saying, it's because there is a wealth of pass catching to be had in Houston. So it's not necessarily, as you're saying, with Rashee Rice. Rashee Rice is competing against Travis Kelce, who's obviously going to be still the pass catching fulcrum for Mahomes. But again, then other than that, it's Sky Moore, Kadarius Toney, MVS. Who's the other? Justin Watson. He's not competing as nearly as much for target share as Diggs will be. And
Rashee Rice showed that he could be trusted last year in the way that those other guys can't. So, and T. Higgins, it's we're underrating him. The whole of the Bengals are being underrated. Joe Burrow's being underrated as a fantasy quarterback. I mean, he's going a round or 2 later than C.J. Stroud. I don't understand that, right? I mean, C.J. Stroud at QB6, that makes sense. A lot of fantasy experts would say that you shouldn't pick a quarterback this high who doesn't rush because of the upside that provides. That's why Anthony Richardson is QB5, and you see that there, and it's hey, if I were to rank the quarterbacks in the NFL, he would not be in the top 10. That makes sense. But it's all about the rushing upside. I mean, that's why Jalen Hurts is QB2 in this weird formula that we have. I think that Joe Burrow and the entire Bengals offense is getting a little underrated because people are gun shy after what happened last year. I totally get it. But I think that this is a team that's on a mission this year. And I will be very high on the Bengals when we do our season-long predictions. I'll tell you that going into the season. Let's scroll down a bit. Players I don't like in this. I should say James Cook, another really strong option with a lot of volume that we could be seeing in Buffalo. Because, again, no Diggs. They're going to have to be more run heavy in general, and he could be getting a lot more dump offs. And he played well again towards the back half of the year when they started to go on that run. Josh Jacobs is also getting a little underrated. I think they're both at good ADPs, average draft position, I should say. But there's a universe where Josh Jacobs is a top 5 running back this year because he could be playing the Aaron Jones role, but this time actually be in good shape going into the season because he was holding out last year for the Raiders, didn't have a good year at all, but you could tell that he didn't have camp, and he came in very late, and he hated his situation, he hated his contract, he hated the team, he wanted out. He didn't try that hard. So he's on a very team-friendly deal with a play caller in Matt LaFleur who loves to run the ball in creative ways. That's how Aaron Jones and play through the run. That's how Aaron Jones became the star that he did. So also Kyler Murray there at 57 in terms of a rushing quarterback. I'd probably straight up I'd rather have Kyler Murray than Anthony Richardson. The talent, I get it. Anthony Richardson is like, he could be a superstar. But Murray, we know what he is. And we know, I think that, I don't know, QB7 just seems too low for him, given his rushing upside. And he'll be fully healed off that ACL. And then look at that differential. So Trey McBride at 49 and then Mark Andrews at 4. Can we just scroll up for a sec to look at Sam Laporta? That makes no sense. So Sam Laporta is 27th overall as tight end 1. Travis Kelce, who's falling off a little bit and seems a little distracted in the offseason. I don't know if you guys have caught that, is at 31 at tight end 2. Now we go down to the other two guys who I think are in the same category. Tight end 4, Mark Andrews at 59. So that's way, way down there. I would much rather have those guys at that value. And Trey McBride at 49. But I mean, even Mark Andrews there at 59. Like, those are I think those are smarter picks than reaching for Kelce or Laporta, regardless of how much I like their talent. I just don't like the situation as much. I mean, look, Kelce's going to get his, but is there a chance that he falls off this year? We're still waiting, right? And last year was not as dominant as he'd been with Mahomes in their previous runs. So there, Joe Burrow as QB8 at 61, I think is great value too. Dak Prescott, I think there's concerns. Who is the other option outside of CeeDee Lamb? Brandon Cooks is just not it. And I don't know. It could be the year it all falls apart. Chris Godwin, another guy, right off an ACL here, going at 62. In an offense where they like to pass to those two players in particular, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, I like him as well as an option. Christian Kirk, I like less. There have been reports about snap count and him kind of getting less reps at this moment. So Christian Kirk, I don't know if his role is something that I feel positive about, and you can see that he's kind of falling in rankings there as well. So I'm not alone in that regard. Let's keep going. Hopefully this is helpful for people. I mean, even Dalton Kincaid at tight end 5. Dalton Kincaid could be the top tight end in fantasy this year, and he's going at 64. And then you're taking Sam Laporta in the 3rd round. That's not a recipe for success in my view. Dalton Kincaid could be the top pass catcher in this offense in Buffalo. You look at that situation. 2nd year, very talented 1st-round tight end, top 3 quarterback in the NFL. Really good situation. James Conner, Bradley mentioned all of the improvements to the Arizona offensive line. Conner's also really strong in pass protection, so he's out there quite a bit. And Kyler Murray could dump off the ball to him, and he could be that 3rd pass catching option, honestly, behind Marvin Harrison and Trey McBride. So James Conner, I really like there. Deontay Johnson, from a volume perspective, I hate the idea of buying into Carolina, but they're going to be bad and throwing the ball a lot. And Deontay Johnson, all reports is that he's apparently their best pass catcher in Carolina. Keenan Allen, do not like that pick, okay? Take Rome Odunze later. I think Keenan Allen is, based on what I'm hearing, maybe the 3rd wide receiver in camp, and Rome Odunze has been like absolutely stellar. It's showed up in the footage of coming out of Chicago and some of the reports out of preseason. Rome Odunze was a guy that, am I saying it right? Rome Odunze, or I'm adding EA at the end. It's Rome Odunze, right?
It's I'm unclear because I've heard people say a Dunze and a Dunze. I don't actually know.
All right, maybe I'll say both in this segment and then just like see.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah. So
Presumably someone will say his name.
Rome Odunze, I think,
Correctly.
is wide receiver 2, and he's getting taken later, right, than Keenan Allen, who is an older version of Rome Odunze. And Rome and Caleb seemingly are developing a friendship, a close relationship. Caleb wanted Rome Odunze and talked to the Bears about him before they took him as their second, top 10 pick that they had in the draft. And they're developing a connection right away. And Rome is like the ultimate character guy, ultimate worker, and he looks really good from what I've seen so far. So I think Rome Odunze could be one of the steals of the draft, and he's not even on our board yet. My point is just that I don't love Keenan Allen at that ADP. I like Jordan Love, by the way, at 70 as QB 10. That's a sleeper for. I mean,
there's a chance that really pays dividends, depending on if he really does build on like a second half of the season last year,
Yep.
borderline MVP, down ballot MVP case with how well he played like weeks 9 to 17.
It's because of his bad start to last year that he's not higher, but I think they just rewarded him with a massive contract. I think they think he's the guy that showed up in the playoffs and at the back half of the year. And I think so too. And Green Bay, they run their offense through their quarterback, so he'll have a lot of volume as a thrower. Another player I love, Bradley, you'll like this more. It's one of your guys, David Montgomery at 72. I love Gibbs as a talent. He was my number one guy, like at ADP. I mean, I drafted him last year way too early, and it paid off. Like he was a really, look, I lost in the semifinals, but he was an amazing pick for that reason. But now he's going higher than he was, and he's dealing with, I think it's a hamstring issue, if I'm not mistaken. He's gotten better, and he looks fine. But those are the injuries. When I hear soft tissue hamstring in camp, it's the kind of thing where, like, that can linger, And, like, that calf strain that Joe Burrow got in camp, what do you know? That went into the season. It was a big deal, and kind of was a part of things falling apart for them that year. So David Montgomery is a safe option. Once you start to get to this point in the draft, we're at low-end starter range. Like you see DeAndre Swift and Najee Harris. People are overthinking Najee Harris a little bit. Another guy who's the RB2 has been injured, and Najee's not fast, but we know that Arthur Smith loves to run the ball. And just from a volume perspective, Najee could be a guy that has more value at 74 overall as a starting running back. Like, Montgomery's a great handcuff meaning, for people that don't know, you get the RB2 in case the RB1 gets injured. This is how you draft as we start to get into this point. But, I mean, Najee's an RB1. DeAndre Swift's probably RB1 at this point at 72, 73. Montgomery is a very high-end RB2 who will get almost RB1 level goal line touches at this point. So I love Montgomery there. And I mean, I think Najee, it's not going to be fun to watch Najee in Pittsburgh this year, but to get him at 74, he could be their goal line back.
But I will say, and I agree with you in terms of Montgomery in the sense that Montgomery really was like the bell cow goal line back for them, while Gibbs sort of got a lot of the screen pass touches. He shot off for, some really long distance explosive runs when Montgomery, on basically any 1 yard to 2 yard out from the red zone would punch in some of those touchdowns that Gibbs would maybe set up. But of course, now Gibbs going into his second year, I'm sure they will be getting him into even more packages and relying on him more because they have the best off potentially. I don't even think it's necessarily that much of a competition, but they may have or do have the best offensive line in the league in Detroit.
Yep.
And then I will argue, though, I agree with you in terms of kind of Najee maybe not having the most aesthetically pleasing style of running. He's a bit more of a between the tackles bruiser, but the Steelers' offensive line, I do think, has the possibility of being significantly improved from last year, because I do think there's a chance that Broderick Jones, who they drafted last year, continues to improve and continues to get better at one of the tackle spots. They drafted Troy Fatano out of Washington, who I think is one of the best run blockers that was going to come out of this draft. He might even be one of the best tackles, period, coming out of this draft, just because of how athletic and how already the floor for his run blocking is already. And then a potential steal based on what I've been seeing in preseason and just what people have been saying from the number one kind of ranked center in this draft, Zach Frazier. The Steelers got as well, and he's already been playing really, really well in preseason. So I think there's a real chance that there's an elevated sense of play in the Steelers offensive line, and especially if there's maybe a little bit or a lot of bit of instability at the quarterback position. If they're going to mash running the ball with a better offensive line, it might be a bit of a different situation than it was last year for that run game, which was already making more of an impression with Jaylen Warren and Najee Harris to begin with, I think, towards the second half of last season. And now, without the stink of Matt Canada and the introduction of Arthur Smith at OC, I think we could see even a
different kind of stink, but at least a run-heavy
but a more
stink.
and a kind of like more creative stink.
Yes.
We'll still have probably weird press conferences where he's just like,
But he's obsessed with establishing the run.
Exactly,
first.
100%. And doing creative stuff with it. I mean, the one thing that you really couldn't take away, I think, of anything, the Falcons were almost like too cute with how creative they were with the run game, which almost bit them in the butt. Smith maybe will regulate a little bit. I mean, I'm sure Mike Tomlin will probably be like, you have to regulate a little bit. But I think with the personnel and with Arthur Smith as opposed to Matt Canada, the run game can be better.
And Tomlin wants a ball control situation on the other side of the ball so that his defense can have maximum impact. So let's scroll down a little bit. A receiver I'm not as high on is, really going at wide receiver 36 at 71. I guess I like that too. That's probably good. I mean, it's just like, gosh, another variance, him going to Tennessee, and I just don't know how much I trust the quarterback situation there. I mean, damn, can that dude throw it hard, but can he throw it accurately? I don't know. So we're getting to a point where it's like, okay, Kyle Pitts, tight end 7, is that too low? But it still is. I gotta see it to believe it. I'm sorry.
And I think I do understand the hesitation just because it is still a projection with Pitts. Like if we can see a little bit more move stuff for Pitts as opposed to making him just this deep threat, which is not really his game. He's a little bit more of an in-breaker slot guy despite his size. Because of his speed, because he's such a fast guy for his stature, he almost operates better from inline, better from the slot, better from going on these in-breaking routes, as opposed to kind of be looking at as a field stretcher, which was not really his game. So if they can key in on that, this new Falcons coaching staff, maybe, but as you're saying, it's a bet regardless, because we don't know that it's going to happen the way we want it to happen.
Right. I mean, and just in terms of situation, I like Kittle and Evan Ingram more.
Ingram, as I think I'm sure you've seen this as well. My friends were telling me about this in the draft, which I did not realize. He had a really almost pretty stellar completion record. Like he was just basically all of these kind of 3-yard outs, these bubble screens. He was catching every ball, which we unfortunately didn't really see in New York.
No,
but
it was the opposite.
Right.
He was causing interceptions by like everything was bouncing off his hands. But
so I think to your point, Ingram and Kittle will probably, in my view, be just more safe bets.
I mean, look, Kittle's getting up there too, but Kyle Pitts is kind of like on my I'm staying away for now. And Jaden Reed I like at 80. I mean, he has an option. He has the ability maybe to be the top receiver for Green Bay, and to get him at wide receiver 37 this late in the draft could be good. Yeah, I mean, Javonte Williams is another player where he's been good in camp apparently. It remains to be seen how they're going to use the running back, if it's going to be more 50-50 with him and Jaleel McLaughlin. But, taking a flyer on him, who really had a very good rookie year, obviously, is not a bad bet. Tony Pollard is my kind of secret. I'm a fan of him at this draft position. I think he's getting a bit of a short shrift. He's here at 85th overall at RB27. I just think he's more talented than Tajay Spears. They signed him to a deal, and he's getting a bit of flack for a season where he was coming off a serious broken bone injury that he got in the playoffs, and he just never fully recovered last year for the Cowboys. And just with this, with the amazing offensive line coaching that they're going to get in Tennessee, there could be some real holes for Tony Pollard, and he has the speed where I just feel like he's getting a little bit underdrafted at this point. So let's keep going. I'll give some maybe more sporadic thoughts as we get a little bit further on in this draft. Tua, I would stay the hell away from that guy. He can't stay on the fields on a. I mean, he played. He'll also fall off for you in December, which is when you need him for fantasy championship purposes. Caleb Williams, I'd much rather have at that draft position. There is my guy though, Brian Robinson Jr. at 91. I'm a very big fan of him at that position in terms of value. I even really like Jake Ferguson there as tight end 9 at 93. But we're starting to get into some of the more value positions. Like, okay, so there's my guy Rome Odunze at 97. That's a steal. That's a steal. If you want a really high floor running back for the Giants, Devin Singletary is always not a sexy pick, but he just is beloved by the coaching staff because he's smart. He knows how to play the position. He knows how to pass protect. He'll be out there quite a bit. He's a really high floor player for that reason. DeAndre Hopkins, I don't love at that. I would stay away from a little bit just because I don't really think his heart's in it to the same degree. And there's still just so much variance in that situation. Let's keep scrolling. Rome Odunze, I like at 97. Christian Watson seems to be unable to stay healthy, so I'd stay away from that situation. I'm staying away from basically every player on the Chargers, fantasy-wise, especially receivers, because we know that Harbaugh does not like to throw the ball, and Greg Roman is their offensive coordinator. Chase Brown, there we go, at 109. I mean, he could be the Cincinnati Bengals starting running back if he seizes that job. So he's at 109, and now we're starting to get into some I hate, by the way, Eckler, bleh, like, don't like that at all. Don't like the offense. Don't like where he's at in his career. I would not take him. Keep going. Oh, wait. Brian Thomas Jr. Oh, damn, I identified another guy as Brian Thomas.
I thought you were talking about Brian Robinson Jr. when you said that.
Oh,
the running back for the Commanders.
I misread it, but I actually kind of like Brian Robinson.
Yeah, no,
Jr.
You had no argument for me.
Yes,
I think honestly he's pretty
at
well
110.
Yeah.
Brian, I mean, guys, Marvin Harrison, we just saw him at 16 overall.
No, and he could certainly be a real X factor if he projects the way if he lives up to the projections that we've been seeing, both in terms of his draft breakdowns of Brian Thomas Jr. and also especially what the Jaguars will need in their offense now that Calvin Ridley's no longer there.
Yes. Jerome Ford is going to be the starting running back probably for Cleveland for Dalton Schultz, I'm surprised to see him go this late. But again, it's also like lots to spread around in Houston. But Jerome Ford, that ADP is not going to stay at 118 because he's going to be the starting running back for at least the first 4 games, probably for Cleveland. And I could see him seizing that job if Nick Chubb, sadly, is unable to kind of come back healthy. It was severe injury, so you can't rule that out. Jameson Williams is another flyer that I really like. I mean, look, he was a top 10 pick, I think, or at least top 15 pick. Incredible talent, incredible speed, has had a really bumpy start to his career, maybe less polish issues where he gambled not on football, but on something else via his phone at the team facility, so he was suspended, made an example out of. But now he's back, his 3rd season. He could break out this year if you want a flyer. Let's keep going down. Ezekiel Elliott, oh God, that's like... At 125 overall, he's probably the starting running back. I mean, he's not good, but from a volume perspective, that's maybe... This is when we start to get into handcuffing. We start to take guys that are backups because in case the starter goes down, this is who you want to be taking. Like, Zach Charbonnet is the ultimate handcuff in this situation. I mean, Charbonnet's talented. Kenneth Walker is injury prone in Seattle. At 131 overall, to take him there, he could be your starting running back for many games if, there's some issues with Kenneth Walker. And Rico Dowdle, look, I was joking about Zeke, but I'd rather have Rico Dowdle 10 picks later because he maybe has some passing upside that Zeke does not in Dallas. So he's at 138. I like him as well in that position. Let's keep going. Blake Corum would also be a handcuff in LA. for Kyron Williams. Ty Chandler, I love. Ty Chandler and Tyler Algier there at 148 and 150. Again, with running backs being such a difficult position to play, these guys have a lot of value if you can stash onto them. Like in later rounds, get starting running back or get running backs that aren't starters, but are plug and play starters if your guy goes down. J.K. Dobbins has been talking a big game. He's had a million injuries, and it's so hard to say, but he's worth a flyer if both Algier and Chandler are gone, because Dobbins has a chance to make an impact in LA, and I'm sure that Jim Harbaugh got from John that Dobbins is a psycho in a good way, based on his time in Baltimore. So I think Dobbins, if he's able to play, that's the kind of situation where, oh my gosh, he's back to being the home run hitter he was in Baltimore, but he's been so injured it's hard to say. Still, though, at 151 overall, he's not a bad selection, especially because the Chargers are beefing up their offensive line and because Harbaugh loves to run the ball so much. All right, so these are other guys I like. Keep going, too. We'll wrap up soon, but really late flyers here. Wow, okay, so Michael Wilson could be wide receiver 2 in Arizona, and he showed promise towards the end of the year. You like that? We're in, people are starting to take defense territory. Khalil Herbert also has handcuff value in Chicago, but I don't know how much Roschon Johnson is going to be in that rotation, so I can't recommend that fully. All right, any more guys? Let's keep going just for a little, and then we'll wrap up. Players I'd like to flag for folks. Wan'Dale Robinson is going to be featured in the Giants offense. He could be wide receiver 2 just based on bubble screens and all that. They're going to try to get him into space with speed sweeps. He's going at 173. If you want a really late round pick, that could work. We're basically at the end. Taysom Hill has value as a tight end, but that's really it. Shabiri says, I'm taking Gus over Dobbins every day. Yeah, no, I hear that, but at ADP, it could be valuable. Any other thoughts, Bradley, before we move on from fantasy?
No, this seems pretty comprehensive, and I definitely think the handcuff strategy will be important just in terms of roster flexibility for you, the drafter,
a listener,
and knowing that in a league where multiplicity on offense is really kind of in vogue in the name of the game, a lot of personnel packages will be used. So if you're going to have someone and want to double up on them, it'll probably just help you with versatility, and especially if something goes wrong or goes awry, or if there's an injury concern or anything like that, you have the next man up. But other than that, yeah, I think I think all your insight is very well taken. All
right. Well, if anybody has any questions about fantasy, you can write in an IMS with the Majority Report app. If you become a member, join themajorityreport.com, and I'll respond here. Let's briefly talk a little bit about some NFL news, and then we will wrap up. So there is a battle for the quarterback position in New England. Now, Jacoby Brissett had a shoulder injury in the game last night, and it wasn't serious reportedly, but then Drake May came in, and he had some really good throws. Like, he looked better than I had anticipated, because he'd shown some inconsistencies before, but he had a really, really beautiful throw in particular across his body to Polk. I guess he's number 1 at this point for a 30-yard gain. And you could see the athleticism pop off the screen, especially when he would run and scramble. People were comparing him to Josh Allen, and it's like, okay, he's not as big as Josh Allen, but he is tall and he's a good athlete, right? And you see how young he is. That's the thing that stuck out to me when I was watching that preseason game. He looks like he is 18, like in his helmet.
Yeah, no, he's a child.
He's really young. And so the Patriots fans are dying for him to start. No one in New England, no one in the Boston area wants to see freaking Jacoby Brissett again. They've been down this road. But man, am I concerned about what happens if you put Drake May in there right away with that offensive line, with the worst receiving core in the NFL by like a lot.
That's really my argument, and even from some of the decent offensive line play we saw from a few guys that they would sort of need to have actually hit, like Jukes Okorafor, who they signed away from the Steelers,
Right.
as well as Layden Robinson, a late round rookie for them. I mean, even if those guys play above their station, that's still, I don't think, enough to feel like you're actually affirmatively protecting who could potentially be, if everything works out correctly, someone who might be a franchise player or a franchise quarterback for you. I just wouldn't want to put him in this situation week one, despite encouraging play in a preseason game.
Yep.
If I have the chance, I'd still rather Jacoby Brissett, who we know can shepherd an offense, who we know can play manageably well in less than ideal circumstances. I just think I'd rather that still, just to not potentially harm Drake May physically, but also mentally.
Yeah,
I don't want him to go in there and feel like he's playing terribly because he is in an offense that is essentially non-functional due to personnel and not particularly exciting, because Alex Van Pelt, the last time he was an offensive coordinator in this division, he was fired.
I mean, listen to the schedule that they have in terms of the defenses that they're facing. So they're at Cincinnati to start the year, and we know that Lou Anarumo has a very talented defense. Then they're at home against Seattle with Mike McDonald, right? That's his name. Yeah.
The Ravens DC.
Yeah,
okay.
I was just wondering if you heard me.
No, I will say about Anarumo also is, like, there was a little bit of griping that he was not as effective last year, but I think that's maybe a personnel thing and maybe a bit of like
the losing Joe Burrow thing,
and right, more time on defense, and also with Anarumo too, it was like they thought they could get past losing a few key guys that were really kind of tying their defense together. And, a few of those guys are back now. Von Bell returned to the Bengals, which I think will definitely help them in that regard. But at the same time, Anarumo is uniquely good at devising one-game sample-size game plans. If he sees Drake May there, it's a shark smelling chum in the water. They're gonna attack him.
Honestly, it doesn't really matter how good the defense plays, because then, like, Burrow is coming out there with something to prove after having slow starts last year. It's about outshooting him, and
that's not going to happen.
That's not going to happen.
I mean, listen, stranger things have happened, but I don't anticipate that.
Yeah. Okay. So then at Seattle is coming to town with that new smart defensive coordinator who throws a bunch of crazy crap at a rookie quarterback. Then at New York Jets, who might have a top 3, top 5 talented defense in the NFL. Then at San Francisco, we know that Joey Bosa is going to eat there. Okay. At
Nick Bosa.
Nick Bosa. And then at Miami, or versus Miami. Okay, like that's going to be probably not too bad, but again, tough offense for them to play. Houston, Jacksonville, the Jets again, the Titans, the Bears, the Rams, the Dolphins, the Colts, the Cardinals, and then Buffalo twice, and the Chargers at the end of the season. Like
maybe 4 to 6 like okay matchups, and then a few that I think I would really not want to put him in.
I mean,
I would not want to put Drake May in this offense against the 49ers defense.
Part of why I think the Giants could sneak into a wild card is because of their schedule. I mean, that is so much of I'm just comparing it to the team I know best. Like, the Giants start off at home against Minnesota now that it's going to be Sam Darnold. Even though I think Darnold is actually going to be pretty good in that offense because of the strength of the offense. Then at Washington, then at Cleveland, against Dallas, Seattle, Cincinnati, Philly, Pittsburgh, Washington, Carolina, Tampa. So they play the NFC South, for example. I mean, those are the kinds of where you look at that and you're like, all right, these are not these are some good teams, some bad teams, but the Giants could maybe go 9-7 or something like that. I don't see any. I see 2 or 3 wins on that schedule for the Patriots, and oh my God, like, they should not throw this kid out there if he's not ready, because the fans are they're Boston fans, right? They're going to be insane about it. But I'm hopeful that Gerard Mayo resists the pressure here, because I just worry about this kid if he's going to be able to, like,
that's how I
survive.
feel. I think I just think I don't always think, I'm not always like, I do sometimes think there is an argument in the sense of being, you drafted this guy high, he should play, and get those reps, get that experience of live, so to speak, the proverbial live bullets, as it were, for being an NFL quarterback. But I think it varies when the situation is so dire and you have a serviceable backup who has been in situations like this before, who has played a lot, has had a lot of reps and a lot of football under his belt. It's a different story if it was a guy like Bo Nix or Michael Penix, who have played a ton of football
Right.
and are 2 to 3, maybe even 3.5 years older than Drake May, who also, even in terms of their experience with the sport, May was a multi-sport athlete. He played baseball, he
Right.
played basketball, football was not his entire central focus of his even his scholastic career playing football in high school or middle school or whatever the case may be, as opposed to some of these guys who have been playing football since they were children and basically only focused on that sport. So he's not only young in terms of his age, he's young in terms of
Reps.
playing the sport.
Yep.
So I also just think of it in the sense of that I think it varies between rookies of who you would feel comfortable putting in that position. I wouldn't feel comfortable putting this particular rookie in this position.
Right. I totally agree. I think that the Patriots need to be very careful here. I wouldn't have taken Drake May in their position because I think the roster is in such bad shape. Right. I mean, they're punting on this year. They traded Matt Judon to the damn
to the Falcons. To Atlanta,
so yeah. All right. Lastly, and I had to host the show myself today, so I'm a little tired. We're gonna wrap up really quickly. CeeDee Lamb got his contract, and
yes, this just broke at the end. End of the show.
I'm taking out my earpiece. It's driving me insane. So whatever. Hopefully I'm coming through in the mic.
I'm gonna say nasty things that Emma can't hear.
You're like right in front of me, so just so you know, I can hear you. Okay. Jamar Chase just got more expensive. Holy
yes,
moly.
correct. Yes,
Holy moly.
exactly.
I mean, I think it's designed to look like it's a better deal than Justin Jefferson, but I looked into it. It's actually $1 million less in annual average value. So it's $34 million a year on average, and Justin Jefferson is $35 million a year. So okay, good. The Cowboys, they didn't do a ridiculous thing like paying CeeDee Lamb more than Justin Jefferson for 1 year of production. Like that would be ridiculous, but. I just want to put this out there because Justin Jefferson putting him as wide receiver 1 in the draft. Like Justin Jefferson missed a bunch of games last year and had the worst quarterback situation, arguably, of any of these top receivers, and he still had over 1,000 yards in 9 or 10 games. So he's never not had an 1,000-yard season. Just that's based on the volume that they throw the football under Kevin O'Connell and based on his talent too. But regardless, CeeDee Lamb had one explosive year last year where he was the top receiver in the league. And I always thought that was more volume-wise. I think he's a top 10 receiver, but I don't think he's a top 5 receiver. So he ended up getting an $136 million contract, $100 million guaranteed. And I don't know what the Bengals... This is what are the Bengals doing, right? Why would they let the Cowboys get ahead of them here? Now, them not doing more than Jefferson helps out the Bengals, but it's because they're cheap, right? And now
that's what I was gonna say. Yeah.
But now they have 10 days or whatever to get back out there and have CeeDee integrated into the offense and practice with him. Jamar Chase, he's gonna go into week 1 cold? That's ridiculous. I mean, what you guys have a great thing going. The receiver and quarterback are best friends. They played in college together. Jamar Chase is a top 3 receiver in the league, and I know he maybe hasn't had every statistical advantage, but it's also he plays outdoors. He plays in the cold. He plays against the AFC North. I mean, Burrow's been injured. There have been issues. But in terms of a talent, you know how I feel. I think there's 3 guys, and then there's everybody else. It's Justin Jefferson, it's Tyreek Hill, and it's Jamar Chase, maybe AJ Brown, but then everybody else.
But I also think to your point about Chase is sure, maybe you can say that there are some certain statistical leaders that are better than him, but specifically, I'm not sure, given how the offense is structured, if there is a more vital duo to the success of an offense in the NFL than Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. And again, we've obviously had criticisms of how a team like the Bills also kind of puts too much on the quarterback. The thing is, the reason I say that I think it's different with Allen and the Bills is because of how physical Allen's play is. Because Burrow's play is much more cerebral and much more about him being in control of everything in front of him. It's more of a feature than a bug that so much goes through Joe Burrow.
Totally.
It's because he is what makes this offense so functional and so legible for him. And what is so crucial to that is having Jamar Chase wherever he may be, because he can basically line up anywhere. Him lining up in the slot last year, despite him being such a deep threat, was actually extremely helpful for them in more condensed formations because he was really good in those, because he's good at anything. You can put him basically anywhere on the line of scrimmage, and he is going to most likely, more often than not, catch whatever ball you throw him. And it doesn't really matter who was throwing to him. The same thing was going with when Jake Browning was starting in Burrow's place because of Burrow's injury. So to me, as you're saying, it doesn't really make sense to me if you're the Bengals to not reward Jamar Chase what you need to reward him, knowing that they are so integral to any success that the Bengals are going to have on the field.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, he is the man. He needs to be get paid more than CeeDee Lamb, and then probably just based on time, more than Justin Jefferson. Those guys played at LSU together. It's just incredible. Like, if Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. hit in this draft, LSU, I mean, what is in the water down there?
Well, and
besides
even,
like Gator superpowers for these guys.
And if we even started at OBJ in terms of like, and Jarvis Landry, honestly, those two in that draft, maybe like 2013, 14, it's basically been like a decade of LSU wide receiver dominance for the most part in terms of like how many guys they've just pumped out of that school.
It's incredible. I mean, and you look at what I love about Jamar Chase is, like, more than Tyreek Hill or even Justin Jefferson, you look at Jamar Chase and you go, no, he's like it's like when I saw Julio Jones one time in person, okay? Like complete coincidence. When I was in Las Vegas for work, I walked by him and I was like, oh my God. Like, I'll never forget seeing him in person. Like, it's like different when you go to a basketball game and you see all those guys being so tall. You're expecting it to a degree. But I saw Julio Jones in street clothes, and he looks like...
It's the frame too, though. It's how wide these guys are and how like how dense their muscle is too. They are, for lack of a better word, they are bricked up, these guys.
Right.
Like, they are, and I think Jamar Chase for our contemporarily, he is that person of kind of like, oh, like when we say built different, that's sort of what you mean. But like he's in the similar tradition of, like, as you're saying, Julio Jones, but also Calvin Johnson, where it's like these are guys who almost do not seem to be of this earth physically, and them being able to basically catch any ball and beat any cornerback was why that was so as well, is because they are kind of almost invincibility in a number of ways.
Yeah,
preceded them too.
Yep.
So I think to your point, I'm not even saying, I think because of the arms race for wide receivers now, CeeDee Lamb and the Cowboys, I think it was beneficial for both. CeeDee gets paid, he's satisfied. The Cowboys don't have another shoe to drop to worry about as they now
except
do.
for Dak's contract next off.
I was just going to say, as in the sense of they had 3 and now they just have 2. So I mean that speaks more to the Cowboys' mismanagement, that they still have to figure out how to pay Micah Parsons and Dak Prescott or not. But
I think Dak wants to go to the free agent market.
No, I
and
agree.
Come to the New York Giants. I mean, just throwing that out.
I was saying it last night to my friends too. Giants or Vegas. That's my prediction.
Oh, why would he go to the rebuilding Raiders when he could come to the Giants?
Go and play with Malik Neighbors. Exactly.
Yeah,
and the thing with CeeDee getting what he, I think, deserves, especially just in the context of this wide receiver market, and the Cowboys kind of getting that one of their monkeys off their back totally makes sense. But I think, to me, if I'm the Bengals, I'm like, why did we wait this long?
Right.
Because now, as we've both been saying, every domino is just going to be, I want that X wide receiver's deal coming from the mouth of the wide receiver who has not gotten that deal. It's just gonna keep building upon
Brandon
itself.
Ayuk, I mean,
oh my God, 100%.
Brandon Ayuk is not in the class of, I mean, I in terms of tiering guys, then you put CeeDee Lamb in that second tier for me. Brandon Ayuk is in tier 3. I know that people really like Brandon Ayuk. I don't necessarily think he has the separation for a receiver that would be like my ideal for to give him that kind of contract, but he's going to be asking for more money, and I think that, like, this is another situation where John Lynch Just pay these guys. Like, the Browns and the Eagles get ahead of it. I actually heard your guy Robert Mays talking about this, how, this cap stuff can go over my head, but the Eagles and the Browns have like this dynamic proration system for their cap where they have no problem paying guys based on like this advanced calculation stuff. And
basically someone's converting some of that upfront money into either signing bonuses or stuff that can be paid off at a later date.
Right.
Which again, like, I mean, maybe you're mortgaging your future a little bit, but the Eagles want to win now, so they're going to pay these guys up front. I mean, they're going to pay these guys and figure out the actual kind of like vehicle of which it's going to get to them, but knowing that they're going to pay them.
So
and
why
doing
can't
it
the
early.
49ers do this?
No, 100%.
Why can't they do that? I mean, they are one of the elite franchises in the NFL. You're telling me that they can't find money under the couch cushions to pay these guys in a way that's like more creative? It's just like, I don't like what John Lynch has done with this team. I think he got off way too easy for that Trey Lance thing.
Of course, 100%.
Way too easy.
Because of the success. If they stopped winning, we'd be talking about the Trey Lance trade. Trey Lance draft pick and trade 100 times over.
Did you see how Mac looked in that preseason game for the Jaguars? He was like a freaking baller down there.
Yeah, no, he was playing
SEC
much better.
country.
Yeah, and
but what could have been? The
Trey
49ers could have won this. Would you take Mac Jones over Brock Purdy right now, straight up? Yes. The answer's yes. Size and
I was just
strength.
going to say probably just in terms of like the materials you're working with. But also speaking of Trey Lance, I can't believe we haven't brought it up. He
He
had
looked like crap.
But he look,
He can rush. But
everyone's posting the Trey Lance rushing clip, but he had 5 interceptions.
He had 5 interceptions.
So it almost looks even worse because it's like that's the guy that they traded up to draft, and now he's in another uniform and he's playing pretty poorly.
And the reporting was that it was Mac Jones because that's the kind of guy that Shanahan always liked. But then he was talked into, we need a running dimension for the offense.
Right.
And they took Trey Lance, and look how that went.
But I do agree with you though in the sense that Mac Jones, I think, could have definitely really thrived in the 49ers QB system.
And they
for sure.
That would have been when all those players were in their primes.
100%.
I am a little worried about the Niners this year. That's part of why I'm a little bit less bullish on McCaffrey first overall because of all of the age and the injuries and everything. And I don't trust Brock Purdy. Fundamentally, I just don't.
And in some capacity, both of those things are coming to fruition with Trent Williams in the sense that Trent Williams is getting older. He is enormously impactful and enormously integral to what they do. And he says, "I'm willing to sit out until week 1. I'm willing to not play week 1."
Yeah.
And that is a equation changer.
Absolutely.
Both for pass game and run game, for protecting Brock Purdy's blind side, but also for how much he can climb into the second level and change their run game. Whoever's playing at the left tackle spot behind Trent Williams is not Trent Williams. I will tell you that much.
Yep.
And then also, if we see any sort of regression from Brock Purdy in terms of balls that were probably supposed to be interceptions that by divine intervention weren't,
Were not.
That's a different player.
There
too.
were some advanced statistics about that, about how I think he threw some of the most easily intercepted balls that didn't end up being interceptions in the NFL. And, I just think he has more physical limitations. Like, we have to do this, I feel like, every frickin' season with quarterbacks on teams that are talented and have great play callers. It's just like, okay, it's Tua this year who we have to pretend is an elite player, even though it's not clear. Or it's obvious that he's it's more the system. The Niners that Jimmy G. Do you remember the freaking conversations about Jimmy G? And we had to pretend like he was a top 10 quarterback. And then what do you know? As soon as he gets traded away, it's like nobody reckons with like what they thought before. It's just like, okay, yeah, he's always sucked. No, you guys were saying before, and now it's Brock Purdy is the greatest coming since, Tom Brady or whatever. It's like, can we just have some perspective and context? There's the NFL is the number one sport and league where you cannot have individual success. It's just not possible. If you're the top receiver in the NFL and you're on a team with Bryce Young, nobody's going to care. Sorry to pick on Bryce Young, but like if you're on one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL, it's not going to show up. Like that's why Devontae Adams needs to get that's another player who I don't like in fantasy. He's got to get the hell out of there.
He's going to I think the second that Minshew gets replaced for Aiden O'Connell or whatever, he is going to demand a trade.
Right.
For sure.
Right. And it's just like it's so much about circumstance. I mean, we didn't even talk about how Zach Wilson looked.
I saw that throw and I was like, The reason why this dude was struggling is because he was in hell.
Yeah.
It's because he was at rock bottom and everyone was trying to pull him further below than rock bottom.
It was with third stringers, but look, he's only 25 years old, you know? I mean,
And if anything happens with Bo Nix, I mean, the least they, in the sense that if he gets injured or
they
God
still have
forbid,
Jarrett Stidham,
if he gets benched, or in the sense that if there's any sort of like third order thing that happens that Zach Wilson somehow is getting reps in an NFL game, it's worth at least seeing whether he is completely damaged goods or he was damaged goods because of the Jets.
Yeah.
But the thing I wanted to say too about your observation about the Eagles and Browns relative to the Niners is another great example of a team getting this out of the way early to avoid any of this rancor is the Lions. The Lions paid Amon-Ra St. Brown almost like immediately this offseason when they could. They paid Penei Sewell almost immediately as they could because they realized these are building blocks. And Goff too, for what it's worth.
They did. Yeah.
They're basically
don't agree with that, but
but in terms of I guess them just thinking where we are now.
No, I
where
hear
we
them,
are
yeah.
where we are now. Goff is here. He has been impactful, and he's very, very effective with our supporting cast. With a really reliable pass catcher in Amon-Ra and a maybe who could probably be outside of, Trent Williams at this time, but just because he's so young. Right. That one of the, if not the best young tackle in the league in Penei Sewell. So in Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell's mind, they're probably like, why wouldn't we just get these guys under contract so we don't have to worry about any of that? And now
Goff is like the best dude in the world. And he's like a great leader, all that stuff.
He's seemingly very, very admired and loved in Detroit and in the locker room. And he moved on from obviously the real discord that was going on in LA when he got traded for Stafford. And this team is in the best position they've been in what was, honestly, half a century.
Oh, yeah.
And I think for Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell, they're like, why mess with this when it's working and create some sort of division or toxicity, which is now very clearly manifesting in San Francisco, despite them being in the Super Bowl last year.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, they just are not messing around with it. Look, they're at a different point where we could see this in 2 years in Detroit where they're good for a really long time. They don't end up taking home the hardware. I hope they win. I hope that's not the case. But I just think that people have a hard time differentiating between people who are winners and people who are like elite quarterbacks or players, or evaluating the player outside of the system to that degree. I mean, that's my frustration with Tua. It's my frustration with Brock Purdy. I mean, yeah.
And the tough thing becomes is for both the Dolphins and Niners in those situations is when do the chickens proverbially actually come home to roost, and we have to figure out, we being the Dolphins or the Niners, what if the Tua experiment, if the Purdy experiment, or if any of the issues regarding Ayuk's and Williams' contracts don't get resolved, what's next?
Right.
And the Lions and the Eagles don't have to answer those questions
right
yet.
And it gives you more flexibility because the more you kick the can down the road, then you're in a Dak Prescott situation where the dude was able to have all the leverage. He got his deal backloaded.
Yep.
So he's making like $60 million this year. So it's like the ultimate leverage point because that forces them to restructure and give him a new deal so they can extend that money that they owe him into future years. But he's not caving because he wants to hit the free market and see what's out there, it seems like.
Because certainly there will be offers that exceed just restructuring his deal and kind of like spreading the sausage out a little bit.
I mean, but that's the dream, is like from a player's rights perspective, all these, agents want them to be able to hit the free market so you can see what's out there and then you can play other teams across each other. But that's why the NFL is just like retrograde in that respect, because they have anti-free market for the players principles like the franchise tag, where they can just squat on your rights and remove all your negotiating power by saying, okay, we're giving you this amount for a year. We're not going to give you a long-term deal. Like in the NBA, that's not what happens. There's no mechanism to that effect, where they can just give you some sort of crappy one-year deal and then use that to negotiate and squat on your rights as opposed to having you hit the marketplace. So with that said, we'll read some IMs and get out of here. Tater Tot, who's this year's Puka Nacua? Ooh, that's an interesting question. So like a rookie player that could break out but taken way later in the draft.
So
Luke McCaffrey, maybe?
Well, yeah, I think that's a good
Washington?
option. I think that's a good option just because it's very clear, especially from kind of the gauntlet drill stuff in the combine. He's good. He's got really good hands.
And good route runner and smart and
totally
polished like Puka, yeah.
So he could have, I'm sure he could be potentially, if this bears out, he could be a reliable option for Jaden McDaniels. The other one, I would definitely. This is obviously different because it's kind of amazing with this guy. For the life of me, I do not understand what the actual problem is with this guy. But by all accounts, all draft scouts are kind of just like, I don't know what to do with him on a personal level, but he's incredibly, incredibly gifted. Is Jermaine Burton for the Bengals from Alabama?
Interesting.
Who, by all accounts, for a number of analysts and draft guys and scouts, an incredibly, incredibly skilled and crisp route runner, good hands, but literally every evaluator has been like, personally, he's like difficult to be around. And it's not specifically. It's not like oh, like he had legal problems or like he had a situation that was reported on, like, unless I'm missing something, which I certainly could be. I haven't read all the reporting about this guy.
Yeah.
But a number of scouts have basically been like anonymously been like, he is hard. He's a difficult person.
That's
but
really
he's
funny.
But he's really, really talented. So if he over Andre Osivas, the other, who would be the other third wide receiver option in Cincinnati, if he gets either similar target share or actually gets some of those wide receiver 3 reps, I actually think he could come across as a really, really good option for Burrow.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, the other person these are all, Puka was taken later than these guys, so it's not perfect, but I like that option. I also like Roman Wilson, who
yes, totally. Wilson was a very reliable guy for JJ McCarthy when they
reliable,
did pass the ball.
and he's on Pittsburgh. He's been injured, but I like him as a third round pick because who fell too far in the draft was Nico Collins coming out of
and another Michigan guy.
A run heavy system in Michigan where it's like, did this person have the opportunity to show all of their talents?
Right.
And Roman Wilson, by all accounts, also really smart, hard worker. Same thing with Puka Nacua, that kind of guy that can take all the coaching and work with that offense. So.
And similarly with Puka, the reason why he dropped were injury concerns.
Yeah,
he had a similar, where it was just health reasons that he people knew that at BYU he had incredible hands and was a great route runner. The health problem was just really the concern with him
and the BYU of it all.
And right, right in terms of like anytime you're analyzing some of these guys, you also do have to kind of inevitably factor in degree of competition.
Yeah. Antifa Lockhart, wasting a first-round pick and a guy who was to catch passes from Sam Darnold sounds like a good way to lose. Hey, okay, so that is just
nasty.
Antifa Lockhart, you're full of piss and vinegar, aren't you? No, I don't agree with that at all. I just mentioned that even with the dude, who's the guy, the astronaut or the scientist he's playing with?
The astronaut, Josh Dobbs? Yeah.
Dobbs couldn't throw the football until like the last second he'd make some crazy play. But gosh, this focus is so annoying. He still had 1,000 yards in like 9 or 10 games last year.
Yeah, I think
worse after Kirk Cousins fell apart. Now you can say do I think Sam Darnold is better than either of those two backups he played with last year? And Sam Darnold has skill as an intermediate thrower, which is perfect for his skill set. I think that they'll still be a decent offense. I think they'll probably be a top half of the league, maybe top 12 offense, even with Sam Darnold.
And because also, as we said, I think we said last week, he's going into a very QB-friendly system, too. If he's most
QB-friendly system maybe in the NFL.
If he's going to succeed anywhere, it will be with Kevin O'Connell coaching him.
Yes, so I think that they get Justin Jefferson open regardless. So I still just can't say that he's not the best receiver in fantasy. I just don't. From a volume perspective, from a situation, I'm high on him. All right, guys, I'm losing my voice as you can hear. Appreciate you all. We will be back next week, but not for Monday because that's Labor Day. I think we're going to do I think we might just do Thursday. I think we might get all the information that we need and then do it Thursday.
It will be literally as close as we can to having all the information before kickoff. So I think that actually makes a little bit of sense.
So tune in if you want live information and don't want to wait for the podcast because then we will have that for you and our predictions if you want to follow up with that with, just theoretically some sort of, wager in bottle caps.
Academically.
Yeah, academically. All right, guys. Appreciate you all. See you tomorrow. Next week.
Bye.